So we must do two things, two great things together to encompass that enormous new view that lies before us, but to encompass it within the framework of science, to see it within the whole categorical framework of science, and to see that these two are not separate, but that they are wedded. The bigness of the idea, the newness of the idea, the greatness of it is one with the structure of science, the structure of being itself.
So we have come in the Apocalypse chapter to that section on the God-crowned woman, and I gave you the breaks yesterday afternoon and asked you to spend the evening with that text. I like to build always back up to where we are and to get the momentum that will enable us to go forward. So from where do we draw that momentum? We have seen that there is an evolving sense of demonstration. When we took chapter 11 in Revelation, we looked at that perilous passage, so to say, as Mrs. Eddy refers to that perilous passage at the close of her exegesis on the text of Revelation 10, and could see that that perilous passage is to go beyond the 3.5, that it is to begin to measure the temple, which means to calculate in terms of life, truth, and love, to calculate that sense of life, sense of the idea of life, of the superstructure of truth, and of the shrine of love. And that as we do that, we see that our sense of Christian Science, our sense of Christ Jesus, our sense of the Bible and the textbook will begin to come to life. And that we will also gain an insight into what will happen in the 7,000-year period, because that point of measuring the temple was at the close of the 6th trumpet. The close of that 6th standpoint of uncovering the counterfeit sense of what God is. And that new sense of demonstration begins to give us the first insight into what the 7,000-year period will be. You know that it is that consciousness that begins to see that all kingdoms are the kingdoms of our God, our Lord, and of His Christ. And that the temple of God in heaven is opened. Isn't that what we saw in that 7th? It says, and the temple of God was opened in heaven, and the ark of His testament seen. So that the temple of God is opened and the ark seen, as though to say, what awaits you as your demonstration is that you will see God face to face. That there will be no more surface structure, no more symbolizing of reality, but reality itself. You see, no sense of the idea of life, but life. No superstructure. You see, no surface structure. No structure above, and still a deep structure that we haven't touched and become one with. No shrine of love, but love itself. That's what I mean by no surface structure, no symbolizing of reality, but reality itself. And this is what we come to at the point of the 7,000-year period. It is actually the last symbolizing that we have, the last symbolization. In a sense, there is, or I'm feeling a touch too of the 8th day of everything really coming to the point of an 8th day where there is no symbolization, where there is just that one being. So with that disclosure, the third vision of uncovering comes to an end. And we come to the fourth vision, and we touch now the third aspect in that process of analysis, uncovering, and annihilation. We touch the annihilation aspect. It is the annihilation of all that would stand in the way of the fulfillment of that which we have seen as the promise of the 7,000-year period. And how does that annihilation go on? It goes on by either one of two methods. Either by truth destroying error, or by love which knows no error. It's either a consciousness of truth that destroys error, which is the method of the 6,000-year period, or it is the consciousness of love, which cannot know error, and that is the consciousness of the 7,000-year period. It is either, therefore, the Michael sense within us or the Gabriel sense within us. And Mrs. Eddy says that she depicts the divine method of warfare in science. She's depicting the divine method of warfare in science. She's depicting the method of the 7,000-year period, the method of the woman sense, the sense of love. And so with that 12th chapter, we come obviously to something that is very necessary to us today to see, because each one of us must put on that consciousness of the God-crowned woman in order to give birth to the 7,000-year period of divine science. So it is that woman which is taking on the role of motherhood to bring forth the child of divine science, which will rule everything, which will be the ruler of all the realm, the whole realm. So how do we bring forth that idea of divine science? We see now that she's going to depict for us how that takes place and how we move from scientific thought, we move on in that ascending scale from scientific thought, which is what the angel, that mighty angel come down in chapter 10 was depicting scientific thought. We move now to divine idea. This is what the section on the woman will bring out, the sense of consciousness at the point of divine idea. So she says on page 559 at the bottom, the 12th chapter of the Apocalypse, or Revelation of St. John, has a special suggestiveness in connection with the 19th century. Connection with that century that is just on the verge of the new millennium. And in the opening of the 6th seal, typical of 6,000 years since Adam, the distinctive feature has reference to the present age. Yes, we know this, and we've discussed this. Now, she says, the 12th chapter of Apocalypse typifies the divine method of warfare in science. This is the method of love, the divine method of handling evil through true womanhood. The following chapters, meaning of course the following chapters in Revelation, depict the fatal effects of trying to meet error with error. The narrative follows the order in Genesis. Isn't this interesting? The narrative follows the order used in Genesis. In Genesis, she says, first the true method of creation is set forth, and then the false method of creation is set forth. As though to say, these are, again, two very positive propositions. They show you the two methods of handling error, handling evil. Here also, the Revelator first exhibits the true warfare and then the false. So that is the setting for now the story, which is in the Christianity order, as we've said. And we have the first tone of principle. And the epitome is that the spiritual idea is always principle's own idea in operation. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. You'll see that she is already at the point of demonstration with that crown of 12 stars. So again, we have to remember that this woman is a type, that it refers really to the womanhood in each one of us. Whatever in each one of us conceives of the Christ idea and gives birth to that idea. Max Kapler says, woman is the ability to see everything from a divinely subjective standpoint. The ability to see everything from a divinely subjective standpoint. So it is that great wonder in heaven. It is higher than what we saw in the 10th chapter, the angel that had come down from heaven. Now this is a wonder in heaven. So we hear already that we have a higher standpoint. It's a great wonder, but we know that there are no wonders, no miracles in science, that everything is divinely natural. A woman clothed with the sun. And let's just read that section. Let's take that section on page 560, line 10. Heaven represents harmony, and divine science interprets the principle of heavenly harmony. The great miracle is, to human sense, isn't it? The great miracle to human sense is divine love. Divine love seems to be a miracle. And the grand necessity of existence is to gain the true idea of what constitutes the kingdom of heaven in man, so that the whole meaning of existence, the whole focus of existence, the whole aim of existence now she shows to be at the point of love, to gain the true idea of what constitutes the kingdom of heaven in man, what constitutes the reign of divine science within us. But then she goes on, and it is very interesting what she brings out there, because she shows us what can stand in the way of the fulfillment of that kingdom of heaven within us. This goal is never reached while we hate our neighbor or entertain a false estimate of anyone whom God has appointed to voice his word. Again, so she says again, she's just going to reiterate and address this particular aspect from several different angles. Again, without a correct sense, as though to say, this is what I mean by that. Without a correct sense of its highest visible idea, we can never understand the divine principle. So we need a correct sense of the highest visible idea of the divine principle, or we can't understand the revelation of that divine principle. And if we don't understand the revelation of that principle, we don't understand the principle. So the revelation and the revelator are, in that sense, one. The botanist must know the genus and species of a plant in order to classify it correctly. Can you hear principle there? Huh? The classification of principle. This is all concerning the classification of principle. As it is with things, she says, so it is with persons. As though to say, you have to learn how to classify everything rightly, how to categorize everything rightly. And that you can only do from principle, out from principle. So don't think that everything is always people, places, and things, and that you start with people, places, and things and classify people, places, and things. You start with principle as the principle of all classification, and that as you come out from principle, you see the idea of that principle, you know the idea of that principle, and you recognize the highest visible idea of that principle in your neighbor and in yourself. That each one of us has a sense of that highest visible idea of the principle. That each one of us is more and more expressing and exemplifying that highest visible idea. But how can we understand each other if we do not understand the principle that is behind that manifestation? And so we have to learn to classify not by what we see with our five physical senses, not with what we interpret from our personal sense standpoint, but out from principle. She goes on, abuse of the motives and religion of St. Paul. Now she's going to give a tangible example by telling us about St. Paul's experience. Hid from view the apostle's character. Our character is always hid if we are not classified out from principle. That character which made him equal to his great mission. Persecution of all who have spoken something new and better of God has not only obscured the light of the ages, but has been fatal to the persecutors. We all know this experience of having gone forward, gone into the world, gone to a friend or an associate and tried to share this idea or give the idea, give the highest idea, the highest visible idea of this principle, and of being misunderstood. What is it that is misunderstood? It's really the principle, isn't it, that is misunderstood. And so the idea is misunderstood, and so we are misunderstood. And we shouldn't take that personally. We should see that it is a question of principle. This has been fatal. This is fatal to the persecutor. Why? Because it has hid from them the true idea, which has been presented. To misunderstand Paul was to be ignorant of the divine idea that he taught. Ignorance of the divine idea betrays at once a greater ignorance of the divine principle of the idea. Ignorance of truth and love. It's an ignorance of truth and love. The understanding of truth and love, the principle which works out the ends of eternal good and destroys faith in evil and the practice of evil, leads to the discernment of the divine idea. So she's saying that if you don't understand the principle of the idea, you don't understand truth and love. You don't really understand the 6th and the 7,000-year periods. The understanding of truth and love is the understanding of the principle which works out the ends of eternal good. And so, in a way, she's contrasting or is implying in her statement a contrast between the demonstration of the 5th 1,000-year period, or we could say of the 3rd or the 4th or the 5th 1,000-year period, over against the demonstration of the 6th and 7th 1,000-year periods, and because that demonstration won't look at all like the old demonstration. What you are as the outgrowth, the emanation of the consciousness of the 6th and 7th 1,000-year periods makes you look like something different than the outgrowth of the 5th 1,000-year period consciousness. And we know that the world stays back, hangs back, holds back to a 5th 1,000-year period standpoint, looks out from that standpoint, and can't recognize the highest visible idea of the principle. It doesn't recognize the highest visible idea of the 6th and 7th 1,000-year periods. And so it misunderstands. It cannot evaluate us correctly. It cannot classify us correctly. And yet that recognition, that classification is necessary to lead to the discernment of the divine idea.